Joining me today on my 2008 Suzuki V Strom 1000, which is, for those of you who don't know, a big tourer, and it's the older style, so it doesn't have the beak. But what it does have is a very robust chassis, an almost indestructible engine from the TL1000R and S that's been detuned. It now pumps out about 100 brake horsepower at the crank, or about maybe 85 or 90 at the rear wheel, and somewhere in the region of about 70 foot-pounds of torque. And all that happens in the low and mid-range of the engine rather than in higher revs, so you get a lot of real-world usable power. And the engine's a peach. All my previous bikes to this, including the sports bike that I currently own, have all been quite high-powered, either 1000cc or thereabouts sports bikes. And I've got to be perfectly honest, for 99% of the riding that I do, this bike is more fun. It's nowhere near as serious as the sports bikes. You can get a lot more of the power down on the road, and it's just a lot more comfortable as well. Well, there's a couple of issues with it. First of all, the forks, the standard, are massively undersprung. It produces a lot of diving on the brakes, and this bike is a perfect example of that, although that's quite easily and fairly cheaply rectified with a set of Hyper Pro or Hagon fork springs, which will be coming soon on this bike. The fueling below 3,500 RPM is very lumpy. Now the fueling was done like that, as from what I can tell, to get through the emissions tests for the Euro 3. However, again, that's rectifiable with either a power commander or another fuel injection tuner. And whilst you're doing that, you might as well stick an air filter in there and some cans and get a bit more punch out of the bike. And the third and final issue with the bike is that from the factory, the 1000cc version of the bike had a design flaw, which means that the front and rear sprockets are out of alignment with each other by a very small amount, and that means that gear changing can be a bit of a faff at times. It's quite a clunky gear change, and sometimes you've got a double clutch to get into a gear. However, this is supposedly rectifiable with a gear change enhancer from a company called, I don't know if it's pronounced Cymark or Cymark, C-Y-M-A-R-C, Cymark parts. And all it is a spacer plate machined to fit this specific bike that goes in between the sprocket carrier assembly and the rear sprocket. And apparently that solves a lot of the gear change woes. Now, I don't know how well that works, but I have got one on order, so we'll see when that comes. But other than that, there's no major unsolvable faults with this bike. It is hugely comfortable compared to a sports bike, at least. I can't really compare it to a GS or anything like that because I haven't ridden them. But it's massively comfortable. For me, at 5'8", I'm sat bolt upright. My knees are about 90 degrees, maybe just a little bit under. My hands are nice and wide and not completely stretched out, but just comfortable, so I've got a bend in my elbows and my forearms are straight. Goodness gracious me, what's going on here? Yeah, that means that you can get loads and loads of leverage on the bars. so cornering is really quite natural and fun. Lots and lots of grunt from the engine, and just generally a pleasant place to be. This bike came with about 20,000 miles on the clock, heated grips, USB charger, aftermarket screen and full luggage, and that came in at under £4,000, so it's a lot of bike for not a lot of money. The accessory bracket I made myself out of an old fire door handle and some 90-degree angles. Bolted it all together, sprayed it, and it cost me a total of about £13. And then the mirrors have been changed from the standard ones, because the standard mirrors create a fair bit of turbulence because they're basically just big squares at head height. These are a lot better, they also give a lot better vision of the road behind you. But other than that, I'm really loving this bike. And when I go into a garage and I have a choice between this and my ZX9R, I generally choose this bike. Yes, it's not as insanely fast as a sports bike, but like I said, in the real world you don't need that.